Augustus stands as one of the most significant figures in world history, a ruler whose influence extended far beyond his own lifetime. As the first emperor of Rome, he reshaped the political landscape, transforming the crumbling republic into a stable and enduring empire. His reign marked the beginning of an era of relative peace and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana, which allowed Rome to flourish both economically and culturally. The legacy of Augustus extends beyond the confines of ancient history, as his governance, military strategies and cultural contributions laid the foundation for the development of future empires and political systems. The end of the Roman Republic was an unrestrained period characterized by civil wars, power struggles and social unrest. The once stable republic had descended into chaos, with powerful military leaders vying for control. The assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BCE, intended to restore the republic, instead precipitated further conflict. Into this void stepped Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, who would later become Augustus. Through a combination of military prowess, political acumen and strategic alliances, he emerged victorious in the power struggles that followed, particularly against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. The decisive Battle of Actium in 31 BCE marked the final defeat of his rivals and the consolidation of his authority. By 27 BCE, Octavian had effectively dismantled the republic, though he carefully maintained its facade, presenting himself not as a king but as the princeps, or first citizen, a title that concealed his absolute power. The transition from republic to empire was marked by a gradual centralization of power under Augustus. While he claimed to restore the traditional institutions of the republic, in practice he retained control over the military, the Senate, and the provinces. This shift was crucial in providing stability after years of internal conflict. The Senate, once the governing body of Rome, now functioned largely as an advisory council, with Augustus holding ultimate authority. His reforms ensured that power remained concentrated in his hands while maintaining an illusion of republican governance. This careful balancing act allowed him to avoid the fate of Julius Caesar, who had been perceived as too overtly dictatorial. Augustus' ability to present his rule as a continuation of republican traditions helped legitimize his authority and ensured a relatively smooth transition to imperial rule. The stability Augustus brought to Rome cannot be overstated. After decades of civil war, his reign offered a sense of continuity and order. One of his most significant achievements was the reorganization of the Roman military. Under his rule, the legions were reduced and professionalized, with soldiers serving fixed terms and receiving pensions upon retirement. This not only ensured loyalty to the emperor but also prevented ambitious generals from amassing personal armies, a key factor in the republic's downfall. Additionally, he established the Praetorian Guard, an elite force tasked with protecting the emperor and maintaining order in Rome. These military reforms solidified Augustus' control and set a precedent for the emperors who followed. Beyond military matters, Augustus implemented widespread administrative reforms that strengthened the empire. He established a more efficient taxation system, reorganized provincial governance, and created a civil service composed of capable administrators rather than solely relying on the Roman aristocracy. This helped improve governance and reduced corruption, ensuring that the vast territories under Rome's control remained stable. Infrastructure projects flourished under Augustus, with roads, aqueducts, and temples built across the empire. His famous boast that he found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble reflected the extensive urban development undertaken during his reign. The cultural impact of Augustus' rule was equally profound. Recognizing the importance of propaganda in maintaining power, he fostered an artistic and literary renaissance that celebrated Roman ideals and glorified his leadership. Poets such as Virgil, Horace, and Ovid were supported by the imperial court and produced works that reinforced the values of Augustan Rome. The Aeneid, Virgil's epic poem, depicted Rome's divine destiny and subtly legitimized Augustus' rule by tracing his lineage to the heroic figures of the past. Augustus also emphasized traditional Roman values, encouraging moral reforms that promoted family stability and social order. He enacted laws that rewarded marriage and childbirth while penalizing adultery, seeking to reinforce the conservative virtues that he believed had been lost during the Republic's decline. Despite his carefully crafted image as a restorer of the Republic, Augustus' reign fundamentally altered the nature of Roman governance. His system of rule, known as the Principate, established a model of imperial administration that would last for centuries. While he avoided the title of king, his control was absolute, setting a precedent for future emperors. His reign demonstrated that Rome could no longer function as a republic and that a single ruler was necessary to maintain order. The efficiency and stability of Augustus' government ensured the longevity of the empire, influencing the political structures of later states. The influence of Augustus extended far beyond his own era. His administrative and military reforms served as a blueprint for future rulers, both within and outside of Rome. Later emperors, even those who deviated from his moderate style of governance, inherited the structures he put in place. His emphasis on central authority, a professional military and bureaucratic efficiency influenced subsequent empires, including the Byzantine Empire and even the governance of modern nation-states. Augustus' ability to consolidate power while maintaining a sense of continuity with the past demonstrated the effectiveness of a strong yet adaptable political system. Understanding Augustus' reign is crucial for comprehending the broader history of Rome and its impact on world civilization. His policies shaped the Roman Empire for centuries, laying the groundwork for its expansion and longevity. The Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability that lasted for over 2 centuries, was largely a result of the foundations Augustus established. This era saw economic growth, cultural flourishing, and the integration of diverse peoples under Roman rule. His ability to balance autocracy with traditional Roman institutions ensured that his legacy endured long after his death in 14 CE. The significance of Augustus also lies in his lasting impact on political philosophy and governance. His reign demonstrated the benefits of a strong, centralized authority capable of maintaining order in a vast and diverse empire. Later rulers, from medieval kings to modern political leaders, have drawn lessons from his approach to leadership. His use of propaganda, institutional reforms, and strategic diplomacy continue to be studied as examples of effective governance. The blend of power and political pragmatism that defined Augustus' rule remains relevant in discussions of leadership and statecraft. Ultimately, Augustus was not merely a ruler who seized power. He was a visionary who understood the need for a new political order. By carefully crafting an image of himself as a benevolent and reluctant leader, he secured the loyalty of both the aristocracy and the common people. His ability to adapt to the challenges of his time ensured that Rome transitioned smoothly from republic to empire without descending into further chaos. The world he created shaped the course of history, influencing the development of governance, military strategy, and cultural identity in ways that continue to resonate today. The legacy of Augustus endures not only in historical records but in the very concept of empire itself. His model of leadership, combining absolute authority with institutional stability, served as a template for countless rulers who followed. The title of Caesar became synonymous with leadership, influencing titles such as the German Kaiser and the Russian Tsar. His vision of Rome as a unified and orderly state persisted for centuries, ensuring that his impact was not confined to antiquity. Even today, his reign offers valuable insights into the complexities of political power and the enduring challenge of balancing authority with stability. The late Roman Republic was a period of immense political turmoil, marked by an increasingly unstable government, widespread corruption, and violent power struggles that ultimately led to the rise of Augustus and the transformation of Rome into an empire. The Republic, once founded on the principles of shared power and checks and balances, had evolved into a battleground for ambitious leaders who sought personal dominance rather than the well-being of the state. The traditional institutions, including the Senate, consuls, and tribunes, were no longer able to function effectively in maintaining stability. As political corruption became rampant, Rome found itself at the mercy of powerful generals and warlords who used military force to assert their authority. The chaos of this period culminated in civil wars that shattered the Republic, paving the way for Augustus to establish a new order. The political structure of the Republic was built upon a complex system designed to prevent any single individual from seizing absolute power. The Senate, composed of Rome's elite, played a crucial role in governance, acting as an advisory body that influenced laws, foreign policy, and military decisions. However, by the late Republic, the Senate had become increasingly ineffective, dominated by self-serving aristocrats who prioritized their own interests over those of the Republic. The 2 annually elected consuls, who served as the highest magistrates, were supposed to act as a counterbalance to each other. However, this system began to break down as ambitious politicians manipulated elections and extended their terms through military force or political maneuvering. Tribunes, who were meant to protect the rights of the common people, often found themselves embroiled in the same power struggles that plagued the upper classes. One of the most significant problems facing the Republic was the increasing concentration of power in the hands of individual leaders. This shift was exemplified by figures such as Julius Caesar and Pompey, both of whom played pivotal roles in the Republic's decline. Pompey, a successful general, had amassed great power through his military victories in the East and sought to secure his dominance in Roman politics. However, his ambitions brought him into direct conflict with Julius Caesar, who had gained immense popularity through his conquest of Gaul. The rivalry between these two leaders ultimately escalated into a full-scale civil war, with Pompey representing the senatorial faction and Caesar commanding the loyalty of his veteran legions. Julius Caesar's role in destabilizing the Republic cannot be overstated. By crossing the Rubicon River with his army in 49 BCE, he defied the Senate's authority and initiated a civil war that would result in his complete control over Rome. His victory over Pompey allowed him to establish himself as dictator, a title he used to implement a series of reforms aimed at addressing Rome's deep-seated issues. He restructured the government, redistributed land to veterans, and extended citizenship to people in the provinces. However, his concentration of power alarmed the Senate, leading to his assassination in 44 BCE by a group of conspirators who sought to restore the Republic. Rather than preserving the old order, his death plunged Rome into further chaos, as his supporters and enemies clashed in yet another civil war. Cicero, a staunch defender of the Republic, was one of the most vocal opponents of dictatorship. A skilled orator and philosopher, he believed in the ideals of republican governance and sought to resist the rise of autocratic rule. He frequently warned of the dangers posed by figures like Caesar, arguing that Rome's institutions were being eroded by those who sought personal power. Despite his efforts to uphold the Republic's traditions, his influence waned as the political landscape became dominated by military strongmen. Following Caesar's assassination, Cicero aligned himself with the senatorial faction against Mark Antony, one of Caesar's closest allies. However, his opposition ultimately led to his execution during the proscriptions ordered by Antony and Octavian. The decline of the Republic was not only a result of political infighting but also of deep-seated social and economic problems that had been festering for decades. One of the most pressing issues was the growing disparity between the wealthy elite and the common citizens. The expansion of Rome's territories had created immense wealth, but this prosperity was concentrated in the hands of the aristocracy. Large estates, or latifundia, were controlled by the wealthy, while small farmers struggled to compete. Many landless citizens flocked to the cities in search of work, leading to overcrowding and economic instability. Efforts to address these disparities, such as the land reforms proposed by the Gracchi brothers in the 2nd century BCE, were met with violent resistance from the Senate, further exacerbating social tensions. The role of the military in politics also contributed to the Republic's downfall. Rome's legions, once loyal to the state, increasingly became tools for ambitious generals who used them to further their own political ambitions. Soldiers, drawn largely from the lower classes, were more loyal to their commanders than to the Republic, as their survival depended on the land and wealth promised by their leaders. This shift was most evident in the career of Marius, who reformed the military by allowing landless citizens to enlist, thereby creating a professional army that relied on its general for rewards. This precedent paved the way for figures like Caesar and Pompey to wield military power as a means of securing political control. The consequences of the Republic's instability were fully realized in the series of civil wars that tore Rome apart. Caesar's assassination did not restore the Republic but instead ignited another round of conflicts. Mark Antony, aligned with Cleopatra of Egypt, faced off against Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. The rivalry culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Octavian decisively defeated Antony and Cleopatra. Their suicides marked the end of opposition to Octavian, who now stood as the undisputed ruler of Rome. With the Republic in ruins, Octavian understood that a new political order was necessary to prevent further chaos. However, rather than openly declaring himself a monarch, he carefully constructed a system that maintained the outward appearance of republican governance while consolidating power in his own hands. In 27 BCE, he formally relinquished his extraordinary powers to the Senate, only for them to grant him the title of Augustus, signifying his supreme authority. This marked the official end of the Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. The collapse of the Republic was not merely a result of the ambitions of a few individuals but rather the culmination of long-standing political, social, and economic issues. The inability of Rome's institutions to adapt to the demands of a growing empire, coupled with the increasing reliance on military leaders, made the transition to autocratic rule inevitable. Augustus' rise was not simply a seizure of power but a response to the failures of the republican system. His ability to establish stability where the Republic had failed ensured that Rome would continue to thrive for centuries under imperial rule. The lessons of the Republic's downfall resonate beyond ancient history, serving as a case study in the dangers of political corruption, social inequality, and the erosion of institutional authority. The shift from a republican system to an imperial one was not the result of a singular event but a gradual process fueled by the Republic's internal weaknesses. While figures like Caesar and Augustus played decisive roles, the underlying problems of the Republic had made its collapse all but inevitable. Understanding this transformation provides insight into the complexities of governance and the challenges faced by states seeking to balance power, stability, and democracy. Gaius Octavius, later known as Augustus, was born in 63 BCE into a family that, while wealthy and influential, did not belong to the highest ranks of Roman aristocracy. His father, also named Gaius Octavius, was a successful politician and military commander who had served as governor of Macedonia. His mother, Asia, was the niece of Julius Caesar, which provided Octavius with a connection to one of Rome's most powerful figures. Though his family was not of patrician heritage, they were well respected among the equestrian class, a social rank below the traditional nobility but still holding considerable prestige. This background allowed Octavius access to opportunities that would shape his future political career. Despite his relatively modest aristocratic lineage, Octavius' education and upbringing prepared him for a life in politics. He received a thorough education in rhetoric, philosophy, and literature, subjects that were essential for any Roman aspiring to public service. His studies were overseen by some of the finest tutors of the time, ensuring that he was well versed in the principles of governance and leadership. From an early age he displayed intelligence, discipline, and a keen understanding of political strategy, qualities that would later define his rule. His education also included training in military affairs, as Rome's political leaders were expected to be skilled generals. These formative years helped mold him into a leader who could navigate the complexities of Roman politics. Octavius' early life was further shaped by his close relationship with Julius Caesar. As the great-nephew of the dictator, he enjoyed a privileged status, though few at the time could have predicted the immense role he would eventually play in reshaping Rome. Caesar had been watching Octavius' progress and took a personal interest in his development. He recognized the young man's potential and began to include him in his political plans, gradually positioning him for a future role in governance. Though Octavius was still a teenager, he had already begun to attract the attention of Rome's elite as a capable and ambitious young man. The defining moment of Octavius' early life came in 44 BCE with the assassination of Julius Caesar. The dictator had amassed enormous power, centralizing control in a way that alarmed Rome's traditional aristocracy. Fearing that he intended to make himself king, a group of senators conspired against him and stabbed him to death on the Ides of March. The murder of Caesar plunged Rome into chaos, leaving a dangerous power vacuum that threatened to destabilize the entire republic. For Octavius, the event was not just a political crisis but also a personal turning point. He had idolized Caesar, and the loss of his great-uncle forced him to confront the brutal realities of Roman politics at a young age. It was only after Caesar's death that the full extent of Octavius' significance became clear. In his will, Caesar had named Octavius as his adopted son and heir, granting him not only a powerful political legacy but also access to his vast wealth. This move stunned many in Rome, as most had expected Caesar's allies, such as Mark Antony, to inherit his authority. Despite his youth and lack of military experience, Octavius now found himself at the center of Roman politics, with both formidable opportunities and grave dangers ahead. The situation in Rome after Caesar's assassination was perilous. The conspirators, including Brutus and Cassius, claimed to have restored the Republic by eliminating a tyrant, but they underestimated the public's loyalty to Caesar. His assassination did not lead to the re-establishment of traditional governance but instead deepened existing divisions. Mark Antony, one of Caesar's most trusted generals, positioned himself as the leader of the Caesarian faction, rallying the dictator's supporters against the assassins. At the same time, the Senate was deeply divided, unsure of how to handle the political crisis that had erupted. Octavius quickly realized that if he wanted to claim his inheritance and fulfill Caesar's legacy, he would need to act decisively. He returned to Rome and began to assert himself in the political arena, despite his lack of formal authority. Many underestimated him due to his youth, assuming that he would be little more than a pawn in the power struggles between Antony and the Senate. However, he displayed a remarkable ability to maneuver through the treacherous landscape of Roman politics. He secured the loyalty of many of Caesar's former soldiers, using his inheritance to gain their support. These actions established him as a serious contender for power, forcing Rome's political leaders to recognize him as a force to be reckoned with. The early period of Octavian's rise was marked by strategic alliances and careful positioning. He initially aligned himself with the Senate, presenting himself as a defender of the Republic against Antony's growing power. This alliance allowed him to gain legitimacy and resources, even as he quietly built his own base of support. However, he was always careful to keep his options open, knowing that direct confrontation with Antony at this stage would be unwise. His ability to navigate the shifting political landscape demonstrated a level of cunning that far exceeded what many had expected from him. Over time, the power struggle between Octavius and Antony escalated. Antony had initially dismissed him as an inexperienced youth, but as Octavius consolidated his position, it became clear that he was a serious rival. The Senate, seeing an opportunity to weaken Antony, officially granted Octavius authority over some of Caesar's legions, further legitimizing his claim as Caesar's rightful successor. This move deepened the rift between Antony and Octavius, setting the stage for a confrontation that would ultimately shape the future of Rome. By the end of his early years, Octavius had already demonstrated the qualities that would define his reign: patience, strategic thinking, and an ability to outmaneuver even the most seasoned politicians. He had successfully positioned himself as the heir to Caesar's legacy while avoiding direct conflict until he was fully prepared. The events following Caesar's assassination had propelled him from a relatively unknown young man into one of the most powerful figures in Rome. Though he still had many challenges ahead, the foundation of his eventual rule had been firmly established. The transformation of Octavius from an untested youth into a formidable political leader was remarkable. His ability to adapt, build alliances, and position himself for future dominance showcased the talents that would later allow him to become Rome's first emperor. The political instability of the Republic had created the perfect environment for someone with his ambition and skill to rise. While many had assumed that Rome's future would be decided by more experienced leaders like Antony or the Senate's ruling elite, Octavius proved that intelligence and strategy could outweigh experience. His early life set the stage for the profound changes he would later bring to Rome, marking the beginning of a new era in the city's history. The formation of the Second Triumvirate marked a decisive moment in the power struggle following the assassination of Julius Caesar. In 43 BCE, Octavian, still in his early 20s, joined forces with Mark Antony and Marcus Lepidus to create a formal political alliance. This was not merely a pact of convenience but a legally recognized institution with extraordinary powers, officially sanctioned by the Senate. Unlike previous political alliances in Roman history, such as the First Triumvirate between Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, this new coalition was backed by law and had the authority to rule Rome without the traditional checks of the Republic. Each of the three members controlled different regions. Antony took the eastern provinces, Lepidus managed Africa, and Octavian controlled the western provinces, including Italy. Octavian's participation in the triumvirate was a masterstroke in consolidating his legitimacy. Despite being Caesar's adopted son and heir, he was still seen as a young and relatively inexperienced figure in the eyes of many Romans. By aligning himself with Antony, one of Caesar's closest allies and a seasoned military commander, he gained credibility among Caesar's supporters. However, Octavian was never content with being a junior partner. From the outset, he positioned himself as the rightful leader of the Caesarian faction, using his inheritance and political acumen to build a strong power base in Italy. He ensured that he controlled the loyalty of Caesar's veterans, using both financial incentives and appeals to their devotion to Caesar's memory. The first major challenge for the triumvirate was avenging Caesar's murder by eliminating his assassins, Brutus and Cassius, who had fled east and raised armies to challenge their authority. In 42 BCE, the forces of the triumvirate clashed with those of the conspirators at the Battle of Philippi in Macedonia. This battle was one of the most significant confrontations of the post-Caesar era, as it determined the fate of the Republic's last defenders. The battle was fought in two major engagements. In the first phase, Antony's forces decisively defeated Cassius, who, believing the battle to be lost, committed suicide. However, on the other side, Brutus troops had initially managed to overpower Octavian's forces. The second phase of the battle, fought weeks later, saw Antony and Octavian launch a coordinated assault that overwhelmed Brutus' army. Facing inevitable defeat, Brutus also took his own life. With the victory at Philippi, the triumvirs had effectively eliminated the last major opposition from the old Republican aristocracy. However, the alliance between Octavian and Antony had always been fragile, and with their common enemies defeated, tensions between them began to escalate. The empire was now too small for two dominant figures, and each sought to strengthen his position at the other's expense. Lepidus, the weakest of the three, was quickly sidelined. Octavian accused him of attempting to seize power in Africa and forced him into retirement, effectively reducing the triumvirate to a two-man contest between himself and Antony. Antony, who had taken control of the eastern provinces, soon aligned himself with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. While this relationship was likely motivated by political considerations, Cleopatra controlled vast resources and an experienced navy. It also provided Octavian with an opportunity to portray Antony as a traitor to Rome. Antony's growing dependence on Egypt alarmed many in Rome, as he began adopting elements of Eastern monarchy, which Romans viewed as decadent and un-Roman. Octavian skillfully used this to his advantage, launching a propaganda campaign against Antony. He presented himself as the defender of traditional Roman values and depicted Antony as having been corrupted by the foreign influence of Cleopatra. One of the most effective pieces of Octavian's propaganda was his claim that Antony intended to transfer Rome's capital to Alexandria, effectively making Egypt the center of the empire. While Antony and Cleopatra were consolidating power in the east, Octavian was strengthening his hold over Rome and Italy. He carefully cultivated support among the Senate and the people, presenting himself as the true heir of Caesar's vision. He also secured the backing of Italy's military elite, ensuring that he could count on their loyalty in the coming conflict. By 32 BCE, the rivalry between Octavian and Antony had reached its peak, and open war was inevitable. Octavian officially declared war, not against Antony directly but against Cleopatra, portraying the conflict as a struggle to liberate Rome from foreign domination. This framing of the war was crucial, as it allowed Octavian to rally patriotic sentiment and position himself as the guardian of Rome's interests. The decisive confrontation came at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, one of the most significant naval battles in history. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet, stationed along the western coast of Greece, faced Octavian's navy, commanded by his trusted general Agrippa. Octavian's forces were tactically superior, with Agrippa executing a naval blockade that cut off Antony's supply lines. The battle itself was marked by a series of strategic maneuvers that ultimately left Antony and Cleopatra's forces in disarray. Cleopatra, realizing the situation was hopeless, fled with her fleet, and Antony, demoralized, followed her, effectively abandoning his remaining forces. The bulk of Antony's army soon surrendered to Octavian, sealing his victory. The aftermath of Actium was swift and brutal. Octavian pursued Antony and Cleopatra to Egypt, where both eventually took their own lives rather than face capture. Their deaths marked the end of the civil wars that had plagued Rome for decades. With his rivals eliminated, Octavian now stood as the uncontested ruler of Rome. He was careful, however, to avoid the mistakes of Julius Caesar, who had openly taken on the title of dictator and was assassinated as a result. Instead, Octavian carefully reshaped Rome's political system, maintaining the outward appearance of the republic while effectively centralizing power under his own rule. The events leading up to Octavian's ultimate triumph demonstrated his unparalleled political and military acumen. He had successfully navigated the treacherous landscape of Roman politics, outmaneuvered his rivals, and positioned himself as the sole ruler of the empire. Unlike Antony, who had allowed personal passions to cloud his judgment, Octavian remained focused on his long-term goal of establishing a stable and lasting government. His ability to blend military strategy with political propaganda set him apart from his predecessors and allowed him to create a new order that would endure for centuries. With the defeat of Antony and Cleopatra, the Roman Republic was effectively at an end. While Octavian would go on to adopt the title of Augustus and establish the Principate, his path to power had been forged through calculated alliances, ruthless ambition, and masterful statecraft. His victory was not just a military triumph but a political one, as he had successfully convinced Rome that his rule was necessary for the stability and prosperity of the empire. The Second Triumvirate had been a temporary arrangement, but through it Octavian had outlasted all his rivals, proving himself as Rome's supreme leader. Augustus' rise to power marked the beginning of a new political order in Rome, but he was careful not to repeat the mistakes of his great-uncle Julius Caesar. Where Caesar had openly taken the title of dictator and was assassinated for it, Augustus took a different approach, one rooted in subtlety and political manipulation. Rather than declaring himself king or emperor, he presented his rule as a restoration of the republic. This was a masterstroke in political theater, as it allowed him to consolidate power while maintaining the illusion that the traditional republican institutions remained intact. In 27 BCE, Augustus formally announced that he was surrendering his extraordinary powers and restoring authority to the Senate and the Roman people. This act, known as the First Settlement, was widely celebrated, with the Senate showering him with honors. However, this supposed restoration was a facade. While he relinquished some control, he retained command over the provinces with the most significant military presence. The Senate, eager to avoid further civil wars, granted him control over Spain, Gaul, Syria, and Egypt, territories where the bulk of Rome's legions were stationed. In doing so, Augustus ensured that he remained the single most powerful figure in the empire, as he controlled both the military and the most economically vital regions. One of Augustus' greatest strengths was his ability to balance power while maintaining the illusion of shared governance. To further solidify his position, he accepted the title of princeps, first citizen, a title that carried no explicit monarchical connotations yet clearly distinguished him as the preeminent leader. He also retained the title of imperator, originally a military honorific but one that soon became synonymous with supreme command. Over time, the Senate bestowed additional honors upon him, including Pater Patrii, father of the fatherland, reinforcing his role as the guardian and protector of Rome. These carefully chosen titles allowed Augustus to avoid the fate of Caesar while simultaneously establishing a new political order in which real power rested solely with him. The Senate played a crucial role in maintaining this political balance, but its function had fundamentally changed under Augustus. While he treated the Senate with respect and often consulted it on matters of governance, it had become largely a ceremonial institution. Many of its members were personally loyal to Augustus, either because of past alliances or due to their dependence on him for political advancement. Augustus reformed the Senate, reducing its numbers and ensuring that only the most competent and loyal individuals remained. By doing so, he created a governing body that outwardly retained its republican prestige but in reality operated under his influence. Augustus' control over the Senate was further strengthened by his ability to dominate key political positions. He held the consulship multiple times early in his reign, ensuring direct authority over legislative matters. Even when he later relinquished the consulship, he retained tribunicia potestas, tribunician power, which granted him veto authority and the ability to introduce legislation. This was significant because the tribunes had traditionally been the representatives of the Roman people, allowing Augustus to frame his authority as a continuation of republican principles rather than a dictatorship. Beyond restructuring Rome's political institutions, Augustus implemented sweeping reforms in governance and administration. One of his key priorities was stabilizing the provinces, which had suffered from years of corruption and mismanagement under the late Republic. In the past, provincial governors were often more concerned with personal enrichment than effective administration, leading to widespread exploitation of local populations. Augustus introduced a system of professional governance, appointing governors based on merit rather than political favoritism. The distinction between senatorial and imperial provinces ensured that while the Senate retained nominal control over some regions, Augustus personally controlled those provinces with the largest military presence. A major reform in administration was the creation of a standing bureaucracy to oversee various aspects of governance. Under the Republic, administrative duties had been largely handled by elected officials who served short terms, leading to inefficiency and inconsistency. Augustus introduced a more stable system by appointing professional administrators, many of whom came from the equestrian class. These officials handled everything from tax collection to infrastructure projects, ensuring that Rome's vast empire was managed more effectively than ever before. Taxation, another pressing issue, was also overhauled under Augustus. In the past, Rome relied on publicani, private tax collectors, who often extorted money from the provinces. Augustus replaced this corrupt system with direct taxation, ensuring that revenue collection was fairer and more efficient. This reform not only stabilized the empire's finances but also reduced resentment among the provinces, as they no longer suffered from excessive taxation at the hands of unscrupulous collectors. Augustus also took measures to professionalize the military, recognizing that the loyalty of the legions was crucial to maintaining stability. He reduced the size of the army, ensuring that only the most essential troops remained, and established fixed-term service for soldiers, offering them pensions upon retirement. The creation of the Praetorian Guard, an elite force tasked with protecting the emperor, further solidified his control. These reforms ensured that the military remained loyal to Augustus personally rather than to individual generals, reducing the likelihood of further civil wars. Infrastructure and civic improvements were another hallmark of Augustus' rule. He famously boasted that he found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble, reflecting the extensive construction projects undertaken during his reign. Roads were expanded to facilitate communication and trade, aqueducts were built to improve water supply, and public buildings were constructed to reinforce the grandeur of Rome. These projects not only enhanced the functionality of the empire but also served as a means of legitimizing Augustus' rule, as they showcased his role as Rome's benefactor. Religious and moral reforms were another key component of Augustus' governance. He understood the importance of traditional Roman values in legitimizing his rule, and he sought to revive religious practices that had declined during the turbulent years of the Republic. He rebuilt temples, promoted worship of traditional gods, and even claimed to be acting under divine favor. He also introduced laws aimed at strengthening Roman morality, such as those encouraging marriage and childbirth while discouraging adultery and extravagance. These laws, though often unpopular, reinforced the image of Augustus as a moral leader who sought to restore Rome to its former glory. By the time Augustus had fully consolidated his power, the Republic existed only in name. However, his careful political maneuvering ensured that his rule was widely accepted. Unlike Julius Caesar, who had imposed his will through force, Augustus had gradually restructured Rome's political system in a way that appeared natural and even beneficial. His ability to blend tradition with innovation allowed him to establish a new form of government that would endure for centuries, laying the foundation for what would later become the Roman Empire in both name and function. Through a combination of political acumen, military strength, and administrative efficiency, Augustus transformed Rome from a fractured republic into a stable autocracy. His rule not only brought an end to decades of civil war but also set the stage for an era of unprecedented prosperity known as the Pax Romana. Though he claimed to be merely a servant of the Republic, his actions made it clear that true power resided with him alone. By carefully maintaining the illusion of democracy while consolidating control, Augustus ensured that his legacy would endure long after his death. Augustus' military reforms and territorial expansions laid the foundation for Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean world. Having learned from the instability of the late Republic, he recognized that a well-organized, loyal military force was crucial for maintaining order and preventing further civil wars. His approach to military administration was methodical, ensuring that the army remained a disciplined, professional institution that served the state rather than individual commanders. Through a series of reforms, Augustus reshaped Rome's military structure, creating a standing army with fixed terms of service, establishing the elite Praetorian Guard, and implementing frontier policies that secured Rome's borders while managing rebellious provinces. These efforts not only strengthened the empire but also ensured long-term stability. One of the most significant changes Augustus introduced was the transformation of Rome's military into a professional standing army. Under the Republic, soldiers were often recruited on a temporary basis during wartime, leading to inconsistencies in training, discipline, and loyalty. The late Republic had seen armies become more devoted to their generals than to the state, a factor that had contributed to the series of civil wars culminating in Augustus' rise to power. To address this, he established a permanent army consisting of approximately 150,000 legionaries, supplemented by auxiliary forces drawn from the provinces. Legionaries served for a fixed term of 16 to 25 years, receiving regular pay and, upon retirement, land or a monetary pension. This long-term service ensured that soldiers remained loyal to the empire rather than to individual commanders. By centralizing recruitment and financing military expenses through the state treasury rather than relying on individual generals, Augustus reduced the likelihood of future military uprisings. In addition to restructuring the legions, Augustus created the Praetorian Guard, an elite force tasked with protecting the emperor and maintaining order within Rome. Unlike the regular legions, which were stationed along the empire's borders, the Praetorian Guard was based in Italy and had a more direct role in political affairs. Comprising about 9,000 soldiers, these elite troops were highly trained and received better pay and privileges than ordinary legionaries. Their presence not only safeguarded Augustus but also served as a deterrent to any political rivals who might consider challenging his rule. Over time, the Praetorian Guard would grow in influence, occasionally intervening in imperial succession, but under Augustus, it remained firmly under his control, serving as an instrument of stability rather than chaos. Beyond the internal restructuring of the army, Augustus oversaw significant military campaigns aimed at expanding and consolidating Rome's territorial holdings. His approach to expansion was strategic rather than purely conquest-driven, focusing on securing key regions that would strengthen Rome's economic and military standing. Among the most important campaigns were those in Hispania, Germania, and the eastern provinces. In Hispania, a region that had been a source of conflict for decades, Augustus' generals conducted a series of campaigns that finally subdued local resistance, integrating the region more fully into the empire. The conquest of northern Spain not only provided Rome with valuable resources but also ensured that the western frontier remained secure. In Germania, Augustus pursued an ambitious policy of extending Roman influence beyond the Rhine River. Early campaigns were successful, with Roman forces reaching deep into Germanic territory, establishing settlements, and fostering alliances with local tribes. However, this expansion came to a sudden halt in 9 CE with the disastrous Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, where 3 Roman legions were ambushed and annihilated by Germanic forces led by Arminius. The defeat was a major setback, forcing Augustus to abandon plans for large-scale conquests in Germania. Instead, he adopted a more defensive approach, consolidating Rome's position along the Rhine and Danube rivers. These natural barriers became the empire's northern frontier, marked by a series of forts and military outposts that would define Roman strategy for centuries. In the east, Augustus pursued a diplomatic rather than a purely military approach, recognizing the strength of the Parthian Empire as a rival power. Instead of engaging in prolonged wars, he negotiated treaties that secured Roman influence without direct confrontation. One of his greatest achievements in this regard was the recovery of the legionary standards lost by Crassus at the Battle of Carrhae decades earlier. The symbolic victory bolstered Augustus' image, portraying him as a leader who could achieve Rome's objectives through diplomacy as well as military might. This pragmatic approach ensured stability in the eastern provinces, allowing Rome to focus its military resources elsewhere. Beyond expansion, Augustus implemented a comprehensive defense strategy aimed at securing Rome's borders and managing rebellious regions. Recognizing that Rome's vast empire could not be sustained through conquest alone, he emphasized the importance of fortifications and strategic positioning. Defensive measures included the construction of a network of roads and forts that allowed for rapid troop movements in case of uprisings or invasions. The Rhine, Danube, and Euphrates rivers became critical defensive lines, with garrisons stationed along these frontiers to deter incursions from hostile forces. Managing internal stability was just as important as defending against external threats. Throughout the empire, Augustus took measures to integrate newly conquered regions, promoting Romanization through infrastructure development, cultural assimilation, and local governance reforms. In many cases, he allowed local elites to retain positions of power, provided they remained loyal to Rome. This policy helped prevent unrest and made administration more efficient. In regions where resistance persisted, he deployed military force selectively, using swift and decisive actions to suppress revolts while avoiding prolonged conflicts that could drain resources. One of the most significant challenges Augustus faced was the rebellion in Illyricum, a strategically important province located in the Balkans. The revolt, which lasted from 6 to 9 CE, saw local tribes rising against Roman rule, requiring a massive military response. Augustus dispatched several legions to quell the uprising, ultimately restoring order through a combination of military force and political concessions. The successful suppression of the revolt reinforced Rome's control over the region, demonstrating the effectiveness of Augustus' military policies. Another important aspect of Augustus' military strategy was his emphasis on stability over reckless expansion. Unlike some of his predecessors who sought conquest for personal glory, Augustus carefully calculated the risks and benefits of each military campaign. When necessary, he withdrew from regions that were too difficult to control, as seen in Germania, while reinforcing areas that were strategically vital. This pragmatic approach ensured that Rome's military efforts were sustainable, preventing overextension and preserving the empire's long-term stability. Augustus also recognized the importance of maintaining a strong naval presence to protect Rome's extensive coastline and trade routes. The Roman navy played a crucial role in securing the Mediterranean, combating piracy, and supporting military operations in coastal regions. Under his rule, naval bases were established in key locations, ensuring that Rome's maritime interests remained secure. This control of the seas contributed to the overall stability of the empire, facilitating trade and communication between its far-flung provinces. The long-term impact of Augustus' military reforms was profound. By professionalizing the army, establishing a permanent military structure, and implementing a balanced approach to expansion and defense, he created a system that would endure for centuries. His policies laid the groundwork for the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability that allowed Rome to flourish both economically and culturally. The disciplined, centralized military he established ensured that Rome's borders remained secure, preventing the kind of internal strife that had plagued the late Republic. Augustus' ability to blend military strength with diplomatic finesse set him apart as a ruler. While he was not a battlefield commander in the mold of Julius Caesar, he understood the importance of a well-organized and loyal military force. His emphasis on stability, infrastructure, and strategic positioning ensured that Rome remained the dominant power in the Mediterranean world. By the time of his death in 14 CE, Augustus had transformed Rome's military from a tool of civil war into a disciplined, professional institution that safeguarded the empire's future. His reforms not only secured his own legacy but also shaped the trajectory of Roman history for generations to come. Augustus understood that Rome's long-term stability depended not only on military strength and political order but also on the moral fabric of society. Having witnessed the chaos of the late Republic, he believed that a decline in traditional values had contributed to Rome's internal turmoil. To restore order and reinforce Roman identity, he implemented a series of social and moral reforms that sought to strengthen family structures, promote civic duty, and revive religious traditions. These reforms, while at times controversial, were central to his vision of a stable and unified Rome, ensuring that its citizens adhered to the ideals that had once defined the Republic. One of Augustus' primary concerns was the erosion of traditional Roman values, particularly those related to family, duty, and morality. He saw the moral decline of Rome's elite as a significant threat to societal cohesion, believing that personal excess and indulgence had weakened the nobility's commitment to the state. To address this, he launched a moral renewal campaign that emphasized the virtues of discipline, simplicity, and devotion to Rome. Public speeches, inscriptions, and laws all reflected his insistence on restoring these ideals, reinforcing the idea that personal conduct was directly linked to the strength of the empire. He presented himself as a moral leader, leading by example and encouraging Romans to return to the customs of their ancestors. A key aspect of Augustus' social policy was his effort to strengthen marriage and family life among the Roman elite. Concerned about declining birth rates among the upper classes, he introduced laws designed to encourage procreation and discourage behaviors that threatened the institution of marriage. The Lex Julia de Maritandis Ordinibus, passed in 18 BCE, required senators and equestrians to marry and have children, offering incentives for those who complied while imposing penalties on those who remained single or childless. Another law, the Lex Papia Papia of 9 CE, reinforced these measures, granting privileges to parents with multiple children, such as increased political opportunities and inheritance rights. These policies were meant to ensure that the aristocracy remained strong and that Rome's ruling class continued to produce future generations of leaders. At the same time, Augustus took a firm stance against what he perceived as moral corruption, particularly adultery and extravagance. In a bold move, he criminalized adultery through the Lex Julia de Adulteriis Coercendis, making it a public offense that carried severe penalties, including exile and loss of property. This was particularly significant given the widespread acceptance of extramarital affairs among Rome's elite in the past. To demonstrate his commitment to the law, Augustus enforced these measures even within his own family, famously exiling his daughter Julia for her alleged involvement in multiple affairs. This public display of discipline reinforced the idea that no one was above the law, not even the imperial household. Augustus also sought to curb luxury and excessive displays of wealth, which he saw as contributing to Rome's moral decay. He introduced sumptuary laws that limited extravagant spending on banquets, clothing, and jewelry, aiming to promote modesty and discourage wastefulness. By controlling public displays of excess, he hoped to reintroduce the values of simplicity and frugality that had once defined Rome's greatest leaders. While these laws were difficult to enforce consistently, they sent a clear message about the expectations of Roman citizens, particularly the elite. Beyond regulating personal behavior, Augustus placed great emphasis on civic duty and religious observance. He viewed Rome's religious institutions as essential to maintaining social order, believing that the neglect of traditional worship had contributed to the instability of the late Republic. To revive Rome's religious identity, he embarked on a large-scale program of temple restoration and construction, rebuilding old shrines and commissioning new places of worship dedicated to Roman gods. The Temple of Apollo on the Palatine Hill, one of the most significant structures of his reign, stood as a testament to his commitment to reinforcing Rome's spiritual foundations. Augustus also reinstated and expanded religious festivals, encouraging public participation in ceremonies that celebrated Rome's divine heritage. The Ludi Seculares, a grand festival held in 17 BCE, was meant to mark the beginning of a new era of prosperity under Augustus' rule. The event included sacrifices, theatrical performances, and games, all designed to reinforce the connection between Rome's past, present, and future. Through these religious celebrations, Augustus not only revived ancient traditions but also strengthened his own legitimacy as the chosen leader of Rome. In addition to promoting traditional gods, Augustus carefully cultivated the imperial cult, subtly associating himself with divine favor. While he stopped short of declaring himself a god during his lifetime, he allowed temples and altars to be dedicated to his genius, the divine aspect of his being. This practice reinforced his authority, creating a link between the emperor and Rome's religious traditions. Over time, the imperial cult became an essential part of Roman identity, solidifying the idea that the emperor was not just a political leader but also a guardian of Rome's moral and spiritual well-being. Augustus' social and moral reforms extended beyond the elite, affecting the broader Roman population as well. Public works projects, including the construction of roads, aqueducts, and public baths, improved the quality of life for ordinary citizens while reinforcing the idea that the state cared for its people. Grain distributions, though not a direct moral reform, ensured that the poor remained fed, preventing social unrest and promoting loyalty to the regime. These efforts demonstrated that Augustus' vision of moral renewal was not limited to the aristocracy but encompassed all of Rome. While many of these reforms were successful in shaping public behavior, they were not without resistance. Some members of the aristocracy viewed the marriage laws and moral restrictions as intrusive, resenting the state's interference in their private lives. Others found ways to circumvent the regulations, using political influence to avoid penalties. Despite these challenges, Augustus remained steadfast in his commitment to restoring Rome's traditional values, adapting policies when necessary to ensure compliance. In the long term, Augustus' social and moral reforms had a profound impact on Roman society. They helped establish a stable social order that persisted for generations, reinforcing the idea that Rome's strength came not only from its military and political institutions but also from the values upheld by its citizens. By linking morality to the stability of the state, Augustus created a lasting framework that influenced later emperors and shaped the Roman Empire's cultural identity. Through a combination of legislation, religious revival, and public works, he successfully instilled a renewed sense of duty, discipline, and reverence for tradition, ensuring that Rome remained strong long after his reign. Augustus' reign marked a transformative era in Roman history, bringing an unprecedented period of stability known as the Pax Romana. This peace, lasting over 2 centuries, provided the foundation for economic growth, cultural advancement, and administrative efficiency. Having emerged from the chaos of civil war, Augustus understood that a secure and well-governed empire was essential for prosperity. His policies reflected this vision, creating an environment where trade could flourish, infrastructure could expand, and Rome could strengthen its economic foundations. By fostering stability through military strength and administrative reforms, he ensured that the empire remained united under a common purpose, leading to one of the most prosperous periods in world history. One of the most significant achievements of Augustus was establishing the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and minimal military conflict within the empire. While Rome continued its military campaigns along the frontiers, internal strife and civil wars which had plagued the late Republic were largely eliminated. This peace allowed Rome to redirect its resources from warfare to economic and cultural development. Trade routes, once disrupted by piracy and rebellion, became secure, enabling merchants to transport goods safely across the vast empire. The Mediterranean, often referred to as Mare Nostrum, RC, became the central hub of commerce, connecting provinces from Hispania to Egypt. Augustus' naval reforms significantly reduced piracy, ensuring that trade flourished without the constant threat of attack. Economic stability was another crucial aspect of Augustus' reforms. The empire's vast and diverse regions contributed to a robust economy, with different provinces specializing in various goods. Egypt, with its fertile Nile Valley, provided grain that fed Rome's growing population. Gaul and Hispania exported wine and olive oil, while the eastern provinces supplied luxury goods such as silk, spices, and gemstones. Augustus recognized the importance of maintaining a steady supply of resources and restructured the tax system to ensure efficient revenue collection. Taxation was no longer left to private collectors, who were often corrupt and exploitative. Instead, Augustus implemented a standardized system that ensured taxes were collected fairly and consistently, reducing economic inequality and preventing local governors from abusing their power. One of the defining features of Augustus' reign was his extensive infrastructure projects, which played a critical role in economic growth and administrative efficiency. The construction of roads, aqueducts, and public buildings not only facilitated trade but also connected distant provinces to the capital. The Roman road system, often credited with unifying the empire, allowed for the swift movement of goods, armies, and information. The famous saying, "All roads lead to Rome," reflected the reality of Augustus' vision, a vast network that linked the empire's farthest corners. These roads were meticulously engineered, featuring stone paving, drainage systems, and milestones to aid travelers. They enhanced communication, allowing officials to govern distant regions more effectively and merchants to conduct business with ease. Aqueducts were another engineering marvel that defined Augustan Rome. These structures supplied cities with fresh water, improving public health and sanitation. The Aqua Julia and Aqua Virgo were among the major aqueducts constructed under Augustus' rule, ensuring a reliable water supply for Rome's growing population. Public baths, fountains, and latrines became common features of Roman cities, demonstrating the practical benefits of his infrastructure initiatives. Additionally, Augustus prioritized the restoration and construction of temples, reinforcing his commitment to religious and cultural revival. The Temple of Mars Ultor, built to honor Rome's military achievements, stood as a symbol of Rome's strength and the emperor's role as its guardian. A crucial aspect of economic stability was the standardization of currency. Augustus introduced the denarius as the empire's primary currency, ensuring a uniform monetary system that facilitated trade across provinces. This reform eliminated the confusion caused by various local currencies, making transactions more efficient. By guaranteeing the silver content of Roman coins, he established trust in the currency, strengthening Rome's financial institutions. The economic reforms under Augustus not only enriched Rome but also laid the groundwork for a stable imperial economy that would endure for centuries. Beyond economic and infrastructural advancements, Augustus recognized the power of religion in unifying the empire and legitimizing his rule. He assumed the title of Pontifex Maximus, the highest religious office in Rome, allowing him to control religious institutions and influence public worship. By positioning himself as both a political and spiritual leader, Augustus ensured that his authority was deeply intertwined with Rome's religious traditions. His role in overseeing religious practices reinforced his image as a pious and divinely favored ruler, strengthening the loyalty of his subjects. One of his major religious initiatives was the restoration of temples and the revival of traditional Roman faith. He understood that Rome's religious institutions had weakened during the tumultuous years of civil war, and he sought to re-establish them as pillars of Roman society. Numerous temples were renovated or built during his reign, including the Temple of Apollo on the Palatine Hill, which symbolized Rome's renewed commitment to its ancestral gods. By restoring these sacred sites, Augustus reinforced the idea that Rome's success was tied to its religious devotion. Public ceremonies, sacrifices, and festivals were revived, creating a sense of unity and shared identity among the people. Augustus also played a key role in the development of the imperial cult, which further blurred the lines between religion and politics. The deification of Julius Caesar was a crucial step in this process, as it established a precedent for the divine status of Rome's rulers. By presenting himself as the son of a god, Divi Filius, Augustus strengthened his legitimacy and created a religious narrative that justified his rule. Temples and altars dedicated to the imperial cult were established throughout the empire, encouraging the worship of Augustus alongside traditional deities. This practice not only reinforced his authority but also helped integrate newly conquered territories into the Roman system by providing a common religious framework. Religion became an essential tool in governance, as Augustus skillfully used it to maintain social order and reinforce his policies. Public morality was closely tied to religious observance, and Augustus' moral reforms were often framed within a religious context. By promoting traditional values through state-sponsored religious ceremonies, he ensured that Roman citizens viewed obedience to the emperor as part of their civic and spiritual duty. His careful management of religious institutions helped solidify the foundations of his rule, ensuring that his authority was seen as divinely sanctioned. The combination of economic stability, infrastructure development, and religious revival created a cohesive and prosperous empire under Augustus. His policies established a blueprint for governance that would influence future emperors and shape the course of Roman history. By prioritizing peace, economic efficiency, and religious unity, Augustus transformed Rome from a republic plagued by internal conflict into a powerful and enduring empire. His reign set a precedent for centralized authority, demonstrating how a ruler could maintain control through a careful balance of military strength, administrative reforms, and cultural renewal. Through these efforts, Augustus secured his legacy as the architect of Rome's golden age, ensuring that the empire would thrive long after his passing. Augustus' reign was not only defined by military conquest and political reform but also by an unprecedented flourishing of art, literature, and cultural achievements. Recognizing the power of culture in shaping the collective identity of Rome, Augustus actively patronized poets, artists, and architects, ensuring that his rule was immortalized through artistic expression. His influence on Roman culture extended beyond simple sponsorship. He strategically used literature, sculpture, and architecture to craft an enduring narrative that legitimized his reign, promoted his ideals, and glorified Rome as the center of civilization. One of Augustus' most significant contributions to Roman cultural life was his patronage of poets and intellectuals. He understood that literature had the power to shape public perception and reinforce the values he sought to instill in Roman society. This led to the flourishing of what is now known as the Augustan Age of literature, a period in which some of Rome's greatest poets produced their masterpieces. The poets Virgil, Horace, and Ovid were among the most notable figures whose works both reflected and promoted Augustan ideals. Virgil, Rome's most celebrated poet, was commissioned to write the Aeneid, an epic poem that became one of the defining literary works of Roman history. The Aeneid not only served as a cultural masterpiece but also as an explicit piece of Augustan propaganda. The poem recounts the legendary journey of Aeneas, a Trojan prince who, after the fall of Troy, travels to Italy and establishes the foundations of what would become Rome. By tracing Rome's origins to a noble and divine lineage, Virgil's work reinforced Augustus' claim to rule. Aeneas' qualities, piety, duty, and unwavering commitment to destiny, mirrored the virtues Augustus sought to embody as Rome's leader. The poem presented Augustus as the fulfillment of Rome's divine destiny, the ruler who would bring an era of peace and prosperity. Horace, another prominent poet, played a crucial role in glorifying Augustus' rule through his odes and satires. His poetry celebrated the stability brought by Augustus and encouraged Romans to embrace traditional values such as duty, moderation, and loyalty to the state. He praised Augustus as a leader who had restored order to a fractured Rome, reinforcing the image of the emperor as the guardian of civilization. Horace's work also reflected the moral reforms Augustus implemented, urging the elite to adopt a simpler and more virtuous lifestyle. Ovid, while initially a favored poet, later fell out of favor with Augustus. His works, particularly the Metamorphoses, a mythological epic, and the Ars Amatoria, a guide to love and seduction, did not align with Augustus' moral and social reforms. Augustus, who sought to promote traditional family values and discourage excessive indulgence, viewed Ovid's poetry as subversive. This ultimately led to Ovid's exile, highlighting how literature was not only a tool for Augustan propaganda but also a domain where deviation from state-approved ideals could lead to severe consequences. In addition to literature, Augustus used architecture and public works to project Rome's grandeur and reinforce his authority. His famous declaration, "I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble," encapsulated his ambitious building program. Under his rule, Rome was transformed into a city that symbolized imperial power and stability. The construction of forums, temples, and triumphal arches not only beautified the city but also conveyed political messages about Rome's strength and the emperor's role as its benefactor. The Forum of Augustus was one of the most significant architectural achievements of his reign. Built to complement the existing Forum Romanum, it served as both a civic and religious center. At its heart stood the Temple of Mars Altar, dedicated to Mars the Avenger, commemorating Augustus' victory at the Battle of Philippi. Statues of Rome's great leaders adorned the Forum, linking Augustus to the legendary figures of Rome's past. This deliberate connection between Augustus and Rome's heroic ancestors reinforced his legitimacy and positioned him as the rightful ruler of a renewed and strengthened empire. Triumphal arches were another means through which Augustus celebrated his military and political achievements. The Arch of Augustus, erected in the Roman Forum, commemorated his victories and symbolized the peace and prosperity that his rule had brought. These structures were not merely decorative, they served as enduring reminders of Augustus' accomplishments, reinforcing his image as the restorer of Rome's greatness. Augustus also sought to establish diplomatic stability beyond Rome's borders, employing a careful balance of military strength and negotiation in his foreign policy. While military expansion played a role in securing Rome's frontiers, Augustus recognized the importance of diplomacy in maintaining long-term stability. His dealings with the Parthian Empire exemplified this approach. Rome and Parthia had long been rivals, frequently clashing over control of the eastern provinces. Rather than engaging in prolonged and costly warfare, Augustus pursued a diplomatic solution. In 20 BCE, he successfully negotiated the return of the Roman military standards that had been lost to the Parthians in earlier battles. This event was depicted on the breastplate of the famous statue of Augustus of Prima Porta, symbolizing Rome's triumph through diplomacy rather than direct conflict. By resolving tensions with Parthia peacefully, Augustus ensured stability in the east while maintaining Rome's prestige. The management of client kingdoms was another crucial aspect of Augustus' foreign policy. Instead of directly annexing every conquered territory, he often allowed local rulers to govern under Rome's supervision. This approach reduced administrative burdens on Rome while ensuring loyalty from regional leaders. Client kings, such as Herod the Great in Judea, maintained a degree of autonomy but were expected to align their policies with Roman interests. This system of indirect rule proved effective in maintaining control over diverse regions without the need for constant military intervention. Augustus' strategic use of alliances also set him apart from previous Roman leaders. Rather than engaging in reckless conquests, he prioritized securing Rome's borders and strengthening existing territories. His cautious approach to expansion contrasted with the aggressive campaigns of earlier Roman generals. By consolidating power rather than overextending Rome's resources, Augustus ensured the empire's long-term stability. The Era Pacis, or Altar of Peace, stood as a testament to Augustus' diplomatic and military achievements. Commissioned in 13 BCE to celebrate his return from successful campaigns in the provinces, the altar symbolized the peace and prosperity that Augustus had brought to Rome. Its intricate reliefs depicted scenes of piety, family values, and Rome's divine favor, reinforcing the message that Augustus' rule was synonymous with stability and order. The Era Pacis was not just a religious monument, it was a visual representation of Augustus' vision for Rome, a harmonious and prosperous empire under his leadership. Through a combination of cultural patronage, architectural grandeur, and diplomatic acumen, Augustus crafted a legacy that extended far beyond his lifetime. His support for literature and the arts ensured that his reign would be immortalized in poetry and myth, while his architectural projects transformed Rome into a city worthy of its imperial status. His foreign policies secured Rome's borders without unnecessary warfare, demonstrating a level of strategic foresight that set him apart from his predecessors. Augustus' ability to integrate military strength, cultural revival, and diplomatic stability into a cohesive vision cemented his place as one of history's most influential rulers. His reign not only reshaped Rome but also established a model of governance and cultural leadership that would inspire empires for centuries to come. Augustus' long and illustrious reign brought stability to Rome after decades of civil war, but it also presented a unique challenge, ensuring a smooth transition of power. As the first emperor, he had no precedent to follow, and the concept of imperial succession was still in its infancy. Unlike a monarchy with a clear hereditary system, Rome remained, at least in theory, a republic, and any transfer of power had to be carefully managed to maintain political stability and public support. Augustus was acutely aware that a poorly handled succession could plunge Rome back into chaos, undoing everything he had achieved. From early on, Augustus sought to prepare a successor who could continue his legacy and uphold the stability of the empire. His first choice was Marcellus, his nephew and the son of his sister Octavia. Marcellus was young, ambitious, and closely tied to Augustus' family, making him a suitable candidate. To solidify his position, Augustus arranged for Marcellus to marry his daughter, Julia, further strengthening his claim to leadership. However, in 23 BCE, tragedy struck when Marcellus died unexpectedly, leaving Augustus without an heir. After Marcellus' death, Augustus turned to Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, his most trusted general and advisor. Agrippa had been instrumental in Augustus' rise to power, leading crucial military campaigns and helping to secure the empire. As a practical leader with vast experience, he was a logical choice for succession. Augustus ensured Agrippa's integration into the imperial family by arranging his marriage to Julia, thus reinforcing his position as a potential heir. Agrippa and Julia had several children together, including Gaius and Lucius Caesar, whom Augustus viewed as the future of Rome. However, fate intervened once again. Agrippa died in 12 BCE, leaving Augustus to shift his focus to his grandsons, Gaius and Lucius Caesar. These two young heirs were groomed from an early age, receiving the best education and being given significant responsibilities within the empire. Augustus made sure they were introduced to public life, granting them honorary titles and important roles in governance. He hoped that one of them would eventually take over as Rome's leader. Yet, despite his careful planning, both Gaius and Lucius died young, Lucius in 2 CE and Gaius in 4 CE. Their deaths devastated Augustus, forcing him to reconsider his succession plans once more. With no direct male heirs left, Augustus was left with a difficult decision. He eventually turned to Tiberius, the son of his wife Livia from her previous marriage. Tiberius was a capable military leader and had served Rome well in various campaigns. However, Augustus was not particularly fond of him and had long preferred other candidates. Tiberius himself had shown little enthusiasm for ruling, even retreating into voluntary exile for several years. Nevertheless, with no other viable options, Augustus reluctantly adopted Tiberius in 4 CE, officially designating him as his successor. To ensure continuity, he also adopted Tiberius' nephew, Germanicus, hoping that this younger man might eventually take over if needed. The selection of Tiberius as heir was met with mixed reactions. Many in Rome were skeptical about his suitability for leadership, viewing him as cold and distant. Unlike Augustus, who had cultivated an image of approachability and wisdom, Tiberius was seen as aloof and somewhat disconnected from the people. The Senate, while formally accepting him as the next ruler, did so without the same enthusiasm that had accompanied Augustus' reign. The Roman people, who had grown accustomed to Augustus' leadership, were uncertain about what the future would hold under Tiberius. As Augustus aged, he remained active in governance, carefully guiding Tiberius and ensuring that he would be capable of managing the empire when the time came. Despite his declining health, Augustus continued to oversee Rome's affairs, determined to leave the empire in a strong and stable state. His final years were spent consolidating the reforms he had introduced, maintaining diplomatic relationships, and ensuring that Rome's borders were secure. In 14 CE, Augustus fell seriously ill. Knowing that his time was near, he made his final journey to the town of Nola, where he had spent part of his youth. According to historical accounts, he was surrounded by his family and close advisors in his final moments. His last words, as recorded by ancient sources, reflected his theatrical nature and his awareness of the grand stage on which he had lived his life. He is said to have asked those around him if he had played his role well in the great drama of history, reinforcing his belief that leadership was both a duty and a performance meant to inspire the people. Upon his death on August 19, 14 CE, Rome faced a significant moment of transition. The empire had never experienced the passing of an emperor before, and the question of succession was now a reality. Tiberius, as the designated heir, assumed control, but his rise to power was not met with universal celebration. Unlike Augustus, who had skillfully balanced his authority with the illusion of republican governance, Tiberius was less inclined to maintain that facade. His rule marked the beginning of a more overtly autocratic style of leadership, setting the stage for the development of the Roman Empire as a hereditary monarchy in all but name. Augustus' death also brought about a new phenomenon in Roman political culture: his deification. Soon after his passing, the Senate formally declared him a god, granting him the status of Divus Augustus. This act was not just a religious gesture, it had significant political implications. By elevating Augustus to divine status, the Senate reinforced the legitimacy of his reign and established a precedent for future emperors to be deified. His temple was built in Rome, and his cult was established, ensuring that his legacy would be honored for generations to come. The deification of Augustus also served to strengthen the rule of his successors. By portraying Augustus as a god, Tiberius and subsequent emperors could claim a divine connection, further justifying their authority. This blending of politics and religion became a defining feature of the Roman Empire, shaping the way rulers were perceived and legitimized. Augustus' reign had transformed Rome in ways that no leader before him had managed. He had stabilized the empire, introduced lasting reforms, and created an enduring image of Rome's greatness. His ability to blend military strength, political strategy, and cultural influence ensured that his legacy would persist long after his death. The challenges of succession had tested his leadership, but his careful planning ultimately allowed the empire to continue without immediate collapse. His deification and the establishment of an imperial cult meant that he was not just remembered as a great leader but worshipped as a divine figure. Augustus had effectively shaped Rome's future, not only through governance and military success but also through the lasting perception of his rule as a golden age of peace and prosperity. Even as Tiberius took the reins of power, it was clear that Augustus' influence would remain a guiding force in the Roman world. His legacy endured in the very fabric of Roman society, setting the stage for centuries of imperial rule. The reign of Augustus laid the foundation for the Roman Empire, influencing its governance, military strategy, and cultural legacy for centuries. His policies, administrative reforms, and leadership strategies not only solidified his own rule but also set a standard for future emperors. The transformation he initiated allowed Rome to endure as a dominant power long after his death. The principles he established shaped the structure of imperial governance, ensuring stability even in times of crisis. His impact extends far beyond ancient Rome, offering valuable lessons in leadership, political maneuvering, and state building. Augustus' political and administrative reforms became the blueprint for subsequent emperors. He introduced a system that allowed a single ruler to wield significant power while maintaining the illusion of republican governance. By concentrating authority in his hands but still involving the Senate in decision-making, he created a stable framework that prevented the political chaos of the late Republic. His emphasis on law, order, and bureaucratic efficiency ensured that Rome remained functional even under less capable successors. One of Augustus' most enduring contributions was the professionalization of the Roman military. He restructured the army into a standing force with fixed terms of service, salaries, and retirement benefits, ensuring soldier loyalty to the state rather than individual generals. The establishment of the Praetorian Guard provided additional security, safeguarding the emperor and ensuring continuity of leadership. These military reforms helped Rome maintain control over its vast territories and set the standard for future imperial expansion. The reforms extended to provincial governance, where Augustus introduced a system that balanced central authority with local autonomy. By appointing governors based on merit and ensuring efficient tax collection, he minimized corruption and maintained stability in the provinces. His policies encouraged economic growth, trade, and infrastructure development, allowing Rome to flourish as a commercial and cultural hub. Historians have analyzed Augustus' reign from multiple perspectives. Tacitus, writing during the early imperial period, viewed him with skepticism, emphasizing the loss of republican freedoms and the consolidation of autocratic rule. Suetonius, in contrast, provided a detailed biography that highlighted both Augustus' achievements and personal flaws. Modern scholars tend to take a more balanced approach, recognizing his political genius while acknowledging the long-term consequences of his consolidation of power. While some see him as a benevolent reformer, others argue that he laid the groundwork for future emperors who would abuse absolute power. The lessons from Augustus' rule remain relevant today. His ability to navigate political challenges, manage crises, and implement long-term reforms demonstrates the importance of adaptability and strategic governance. His emphasis on stability and institutional continuity provides insights into effective state building. Leaders across history have drawn from his example, applying his principles to maintain order and ensure national prosperity. Augustus' transformation of Rome was unparalleled. He took a fractured republic, plagued by civil war, and reshaped it into a centralized empire that would endure for centuries. His administrative and military reforms ensured that Rome remained a superpower, while his cultural and architectural contributions reinforced the city's status as the heart of the ancient world. His legacy is visible in the grand monuments he commissioned, the political structures he created, and the enduring mythology of his reign. When compared to other historical rulers, Augustus stands out as one of the most effective leaders in world history. Unlike conquerors such as Alexander the Great, who built empires that quickly collapsed, Augustus focused on sustainability. His reign shares similarities with other visionary rulers like Charlemagne and Napoleon, who also implemented sweeping reforms and reshaped political landscapes. However, Augustus' ability to balance military dominance with political finesse set him apart, ensuring his empire's longevity. The endurance of Augustus' influence is evident in modern governance, military strategy, and culture. Many principles he established, such as centralized administration, bureaucratic efficiency, and controlled military expansion, remain fundamental to statecraft. His patronage of the arts left a lasting cultural impact, influencing literature, architecture, and historical narratives. The concept of Rome as an eternal city, a beacon of civilization, owes much to the image Augustus cultivated during his reign. Ultimately, Augustus remains one of history's most significant figures. His vision, leadership, and reforms transformed Rome from a fragile republic into a powerful empire that would shape the course of Western civilization. His ability to maintain stability, implement lasting policies, and secure his legacy ensured that his influence persisted long after his death. As the architect of Rome's golden age, Augustus exemplifies the qualities of a great leader: pragmatism, strategic thinking, and an enduring commitment to governance and cultural development.